Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to assume that's a yes. Um, some years ago, I became interested in how I would either blank out or to slip off into daydreaming during zazen. And I don't think I'm the first Zen practitioner who has encountered this. And I think I maybe felt a little frustrated. Couldn't I just follow the bodily sensations of breathing without my mind wandering off here and there? And I would be sitting, and then I'd suddenly find myself thinking about something else. And the traditional advice given to people is that if you notice you are drifting off, then you simply gently reassert your intended practice. But there's also in my feeling that's like that I think a lot of people believe we are powerless over this process, and that it just somehow happens that like we suddenly drift off, and and there isn't anything I can do about it except to return to my practice. And um so this question intrigued me. How did I go from paying attention and being present to some sort of drifted off state? And so I resolved I would investigate this. Could I pay attention to losing paying attention? It seemed paradoxical, if not impossible, to try such a thing. But I believed I would be able to investigate this because I knew from Buddhist teachings that phenomena arise dependently upon causes and conditions, rather than just mysteriously appearing out of the blue. And so I postulated that let's see, drifting off happened in response to conditions, and that it could be observed if I was careful enough. So the methodology that I followed, which really wasn't very much different from what I usually do when I sit down to sit zazen, but I set my intention differently. I set my intention to observe the drifting off. So when I first started in the usual way, I placed my mental attention at a point 3 fingers below my navel, and then I followed the bodily sensations of breathing. And then when I felt concentrated, I broadened my mental attention to include my sitting bones. And I did this for a little while, and after that, it didn't take very long for something to happen. And I conducted these what I call experiments for a while, and I noticed there were 2 mechanisms for drifting off. And the first one I experienced was what I call seizing an image, and the second one was like drowning in words. And so what I found in my investigation was that drifting off is actually grasping. It is an active act, not a sort of passive happening that's like it sort of appears to be at at first glance. So we don't just blank out. We lose our focus because our mind has grasped something, either an image or a concept, and then has gotten caught up in it, or we have gotten caught up in what we have grasped. And like, I'll first talk about seizing an image, and like, it's very difficult to put into words. And that putting it into words might give the wrong impression, but this is a talk and I have to use words. So I'll just do the best I can. I experienced my mind apprehending an image. There were no words associated with the image. It was just the image, and my mind sort of grasped that image unequivocally. It felt, the grasping felt forceful, and in reflecting upon my experience later, it reminded me of, I remember watching a documentary on anglerfish, these deep sea fish that have this little sort of fishing pole that with a little light on the end, and then a smaller fish comes up, and the anglerfish just sort of gets it all at once. And that is how it felt to me. It was just like the grasping was very quick and very complete. And so after I became aware of this sort of grasping an image, it was relatively easy to let it go and continue on with awareness of bodily sensations. And during my investigation, I noticed that this different apprehension mechanism took place when the attention was distracted by a word. Like the mind grasped a word, and that caused a proliferation of words in rapid succession. And in reflecting upon this experience, what it seemed like to me, what it felt like, was being caught in a basement that was rapidly filling up with mud, like the mud of words. And this is an example of what is called prapancha, which is a Sanskrit term, and this gets translated as proliferation or conceptual proliferation. And these two types of experiences, I found that the word-based grasping was for me is the more common way that I became distracted. So I began to read and study a little bit about what the Buddha had to say about prapancha. And in the middle length discourses of the Buddha, which is part of the Pali Canon, there is a sutta called the honey ball, which talks about prapancha, and it's always the same sort of formula. There's sensory inputs, whether it's eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, and then it's like, depending on mind and mind objects, the mind consciousness arises, and then with the mind objects and mind consciousness, there is a moment of contact, and then this contact is a condition for sensation to arise. And then sort of subsequent to the bodily sensation, there is the what would be called perception, which is sort of a, a, a conceptualization step. And so it is the conceptual thought, which is the basis for the mental proliferation. And then what sort of happens is that the process it turns back on itself, so that what has been mentally proliferated sort of colors subsequent perceptions and notions. And so it's sort of like the image that comes to my mind is that your mind grasps a thought, and then like this, with the grasping, it comes to squeezing, and the more you squeeze this thought, the more thoughts sort of squirt out of the original thought. And what sort of happens is that at the bottom of this sort of squeezing out thoughts is there is this notion of, quote, I am the thinker. And so from that basis, all of these other, let's see, distinctions are generated, the me, the mine, the not me, the not mine. And, it all comes from this assertion of there is this grasping I. And the Sutta goes on to say that it's possible to point out or notice each point in this process, or each sort of step in this process, and that's, it is possible to interdict and to derail the process, and this corresponds to my experience, and I've also applied this to sort of just very subtle distracting thoughts, like when I sit by my house or by myself, I use my phone's timer to tell me when to stop sitting zazen, and like inevitably I feel this sort of impulse or this urge arising to look at my phone, even though I know that my phone's alarm is going to work. And so, so what I've been able to do is to sort of catch that process when the first sort of ripple in the mind of, and it's not even quite a word, it's just more of an impulse to move or to do something. And like what I found is that if I can pay attention to that, that helps sort of dissipate the energy that gathers under that impulse as you add words to it. Oh, I should look at my phone. It's like if you can nip it in the bud, then that impulse doesn't generate sort of conceptual thoughts of I should check out my phone, I should see how much time is left. And one of the things I want to point out is that I didn't read the Honeyball Sutta until I was preparing this talk, and I wanted to learn more about Prapancha. And so it's possible to like experience or discover the truth of Buddha's teaching without first studying the teaching. We may not even know we have experienced Dharma, but when we might be reading something, it will be familiar and make sense based on our prior meditation experience. And I'd like to sort of clarify something. It's like I'm talking about this for a couple of reasons. First, and primarily, is it is to encourage you. You know, if I can do it, you can too, and that's really important. And then, secondly, this also, or what I'm talking about, I I hope provides an example of how to work with Buddhist teachings in a meditative context. You know, and I think there is a tendency when it comes to religion or religious practice that like people think, quote, you know, only the great masters of ancient times can do this stuff and become enlightened, you know, and liberate themselves from suffering. Or people might 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 think with more sort of philosophical Buddhist words that, you know, like this text is just impossibly abstract, and it's like it can't be relevant to my inadequate or immature practice. And so I'd just like to say that both of these views are wrong. You know, it's like, you know, in Zen we talk about, you know, our Zen ancestors like Tozan Ryokai, and you know, I think for me at least, who's the default is, you know, I'm never going to be able to do that. But I think that is wrong. It's like when we're sitting facing the wall and making our best efforts, you know, that is exactly Tozan Ryokai's effort. That is exactly Bodhidharma's effort. Our effort isn't different from theirs, you know, so we can't judge ourselves based on what we sort of have imagined what these former Zen ancestors were like. So I'd just like to sort of point out, you know, how can we start to work with Buddhist teachings in a meditative context, and in Buddhism there is this principle called, or it's a Pali term called sandiko, which I think I'm saying it's right, but I'm not sure. So, but it's the principle of here and now in our present reality. So this means whatever you are practicing with, whatever you are studying, it is applicable to your life right now, you know. So when we are talking about grasping, this is something you can access right here and right now. And there's no other time for the application of the Dharma. Your own meditation practice is good enough for you to start investigating Buddhist teachings. You don't need to be a Dharma expert. You know, as the Sutta on the Four Foundations of let's see, mindfulness put it, you know, your awareness is, quote, simply established to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and mindfulness. All we need is our diligent effort, you know. And Dogen talks about this in Fukan Zazengi when he says, constantly perform in such a manner, and you are assured of being a person such as they. Your treasure store will open of itself, and you will use it at will, you know. And up until till now, I have mostly talked about I have mostly talked about the mechanisms of grasping from the Nikayas or the Polycanon of Theravada Buddhism. But what do Mahayana teachings have to say about grasping? Well, Zen ancestor Nagarjuna wrote a work called the Fundamental Verses of the Middle Way, and like he has a part where he talks about the relationship between the grasper and the grasping. And so I'm going to read out a couple of verses. For those of you who are familiar with this work, this is chapter 26, verses 6 and 7. Conditioned by sensation is a craving. Craving arises because of sensation. When it appears, there is grasping, the 4 spheres of grasping. When there is grasping, the grasper comes into existence. If he did not grasp, then being freed, he would not come into existence. So my cats decided to listen to my talk too. So if you hear some meowing, that is what is going on. So grasping is so according to Nagarjuna, grasping is the basis of the grasper and the grasped, and the 4 spheres of grasping that Nagarjuna mentions are basically attachment to sensory input, attachment to views, attachment to rules and rituals, and attachment to views of self. But the thing that's really intriguing about this teaching for me is that if we didn't grasp, then there would be no arising of the grasping self. So notice that the act of grasping proceeds with the notion of the grasping self. Stop the grasping, and there is no grasper. So this teaching, it makes explicit what was only implied in the Honey Ball Sutta. And in our everyday lives, we normally conceive of agents and actions in the following way. We assume there is the agent, which is the person, and then that person creates or does some action. But as Nagarjuna's teaching points out, that this notion is backwards relative to how we actually experience it if we are careful enough to observe it. According to Nagarjuna, the action gives rise to the notion of the agent, and this is something that's we can verify in our own meditation practice for ourselves, and this has important implications for karmic activities. Our actions don't reflect the person we are. Rather, the person we are is created contingently by our actions. And so we have been talking about meeting the parts of the mind which grasps. We are meeting the grasper in our meditation practice, and some people might be under the impression we practice meditation to become enlightened, and that's would be incorrect. It is much more interesting and useful, in my opinion, to understand and experience our 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 grasping in the laboratory of our meditation practice. We practice to understand our delusions, and again, as Dogen says in Genjo Koan, those who have great realization of delusion are Buddhas. Those who are greatly deluded about realization are sentient beings. So at one level, the reason for this is straightforward. Our suffering is due to our grasping, and our grasping is based on our delusions. So suffering's the problem, and it's like we can only address a problem when we have an awareness of the problem. So the Buddhist way of addressing the problem is to examine the causes and conditions by which that problem arises. So the proximate cause is our grasping. And so what kind of mental phenomena do we grasp? What is the mechanism of our grasping? These can be our practice questions. At another level, clarifying and realizing how we suffer is all that we can really talk about. It does us no good to talk about what it's like to be enlightened. And as Dogen points out in Yui Butsu Yobutsu Shobogenzo, that's his fascicle, only a Buddha and a Buddha. When you realize Buddha Dharma, you do not think this is realization just as I expected. Realization is not like your conception of it. Reflect on this. What you think one way or another before realization is not a help to realization. And so I think Dogen's really making an important point here, that whenever we have some conception of something, we place limits on it. We introduce inaccuracies into our experience, and we push the truth of it farther from us. And this is a general pattern in Buddhist teachings. That's sort of like what I consider sort of like the negative pathway of Buddhist teachings, which what I mean by that is that Buddhism tends to, at least the Buddhist teachings I dwell on, I should qualify that, because there are a lot of Buddhist teachings, but the Buddhist teachings that I've gravitated for tend to sort of circle around the idea of negation. And so, like, for instance, in Buddha's discourse on right's view, he talks, what is the root of the unwholesome? Greed is a root of the unwholesome. Hate is a root of the unwholesome. Wholesome delusion is a root of the unwholesome. What does the Buddha say about the wholesome? Well, he says, what is the root of the wholesome? Non-greed is a root of the wholesome. Non-hate is a root of the wholesome. Non-delusion is a root of the wholesome. So he's basically saying, the wholesome doesn't consist of A, B, and C. It's just, cut off your greed, cut off your hate, cut off your delusion, and the precepts, like the 10 clear mind precepts, are also phrased in a negative way, so a disciple of Buddha does not kill. A disciple of Buddha does not take what is not given, and so on. you know so these teachings do not establish how we should be. Rather, they are telling us what to look out for with what's probably going to give us some trouble. And the reason for this is that when we positively assert a phenomenon, it gives us something to grasp and to cling to. And the perfection of wisdom sutras, which describe bodhisattva practice. A bodhisattva is encouraged to function without relying on any place to stand, without propping ourselves up with self-justifying concepts. A bodhisattva's way is a way of radical non-grasping, and this non-grasping runs through our entire practice, from sitting on the cushion in meditation to being out in the world. So with that, I conclude and thank you for your attention. And let's see, how did I do for time? Was I good for time? Do we have time for
Yes, thank you very much, Kuden-san.
questions?
It's perfect.
Okay.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for your talk. Now I'd like to